So first I would like to mention that I'm here in a strictly philological capacity because I come from a philological background. I majored in English, minored in French. I hold a degree in modern languages. The MA was in translation and interpreting. The PhD was in translation studies, the postdoc on the Romanian discourse on translations, translation. And for a couple of years now, I've been teaching English at the Faculty of Theology. So I took an interest in English for Bible and theology. So my paper is more about that. I will start with a few considerations on the ESP teacher in general and the English, the theological English teacher in particular, with the types of students that I teach. Then I'll go to the material of method, because apart from general consideration on Bible translation in English that I try to bring to my theological students who are enrolled in a program in Romanian, I am interested in Bible and literature as well. There will be some results and discussions and conclusions. So first, I'd like to mention that I'm fighting with their motivation, because my students are not necessarily interested in this level at learning too much English. Most of them come from Orthodox theological seminaries in which English is not mainstream, and I have mostly are pre-experienced learners, but I also have low experience ones that have been priests, monks, or nuns for a while. And the purpose of the English trainer is to train them in English so that they are able to cope with studying a semester abroad as Erasmus students, or do practice in parishes abroad. Some of them may end up working in a parish abroad, but few of them, I think, will do mission work or actually teach at foreign universities, although we have cases of that as well. So as far as the context is concerned, the period of studying English at the faculty shortened from 4 years to 1 year and a half. So since I've been teaching, English is only there for a year and a half. In this little time, I tried to teach only theological English and not general English. Also, the ESP teacher, those coming from English-speaking areas know, is in most cases not even a native speaker, and the knowledge of the language should be combined with that of the main discipline, theology in this case. I've been teaching pastoral students, also social workers, those interested in teaching methodologies. There's a didactic specialty field for those who will teach religion in high schools. Also secular artists, so future book restorers and church wall painters. And they are all invited to contribute their experience, if any, or theological knowledge to the class, especially that acquired from mainstream disciplines, dogmatics, Bible studies, etc. There's less practical and more theoretical knowledge. The focus is on developing their skills in English in a communicative language teaching environment. Gain access to employment, conduct research in English for career, job prospects, studying abroad, as I already mentioned. As far as English for theological purposes is concerned, because as language teachers are frowned upon by those teaching the mainstream disciplines, this is a branch of ESP, or English for academic purposes, different from English for occupational purposes, which directly trains nurses, chemists, and other professional categories. We have English for Bible and Theology, which refers to the teaching or learning of the specific variety of English used in Bible and theology classes, textbook articles in this discipline, sermons, etc. And Theological English, which is a subtype focusing on aspects of English related to the study of theology, including theological terms, the range of complex syntax structures used in theological writing, and even the broader organizational patterns used by theologians in their teaching and writing. This is a quote by Cherry Pearson, Exploring Theological English. The ideal student level is upper intermediate or advanced, to grasp the norms of Christian theological literature, to be able to deal with concerns on the relevance of the theology they study. Orthodox, in our case, deepen their understanding of the role of Christian theology in the church, or build on the confidence of the parish and the community on Christian-related issues as future ministers, workers of the church. The ideal student level, as I said, is upper intermediate, advanced, but we have mixed class abilities to develop. As I mentioned, as far as the Romanian context is concerned, the period of study for theological English is only 1.5 years. We also have fewer and fewer students every year, the state university being partially financed by their fees. And there was also a complaint that during Erasmus interviews, their English proved to be quite low, so they need improving. Most of them wouldn't do well in a mobility in a European university. As far as Bible translation is concerned, I chose this topic because apart from other issues that I tackled, I chose as lecture a chapter called Translation from Peter Sewell's A Handbook of Theological English in 1998. And I usually start with general considerations on Bible translation with reference to the Romanian and English culture. I mentioned Eugene Naida's dynamic equivalence and his famous Seal of God, which replaced the Lamb of God for the Eskimo people. And of course, the debate on word for word versus the rendering of meaning, paraphrase versus translation, the difference between variant and version, which they should be familiar with. And they, of course, are invited to contribute their knowledge from their Old and New Testament classes. Discussion of cultural issues, reference to things readers have no experience of, to vocabulary as words do not directly translate into another language, difficulty of maintaining the original style without distorting the meaning. Again, as far as particular aspects are concerned, for instance, Edgar Goodspeed's 1923 New Testament is a mission of the chapters and verse number related to the author's wish of getting rid of archaic English to reach the ordinary Christian. Here I refer to Jacobson, interlingual versus intralingual translation, professional to lay communication. So as future priests, they should be able to communicate the language of the Bible to the lay, simplify it to the common folk. There are also basic commonsensical academic writing insights. As far as writing paper is concerned, they should be consistent in their writing, stick to either British or American English, quote from one version only. Today's English version, the Good News Bible, is more recommended with those in a lower, with a lower level of English. I also, one of my other research interest is Bible and literature, and in a remaining optional lecture, I invited students to have a look at the fragment from José Saramago's, I'd say, controversial Cain, but not as controversial as the Gospel according to Jesus Christ. His last novel was published in 2009, and Cain is like a traveler in time, for those that haven't read it, taking part in all important biblical events. And I invited them, first of all, to give their opinion on it, to compare it with the fragment in the Genesis from that Saramago built on. Well, all that for them to give their opinion on the author's materialistic atheism. And as far as the results and discussion was concerned, yeah, we all agreed that the controversies on his novel and other novels, such as Rushdie's satanic verses, come from a general misunderstanding of literary norms of conventions, of the presumed and assumed literary pact between an author and his readers, agreeing with the implied and implicit fact that they are dealing with a work of fiction, the result of an authorial perspective and narrative point of view. It is also a good work from which parallels can be drawn with other writings. Kinds reproaches to God resemble Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor and Ivan Karamazov questions of God's grace. His impassibility before the suffering and that of others, especially innocent children, by the hand of merciless human free will. Cain in the novel taking action, instead of taking action, which was the wise and the good thing to do, God remained passive before the death of a subject whose offering he had enjoyed. Also, it's a good opportunity to comment on the form. It is a prose as difficult to follow, perhaps as the stream of consciousness in modernist writings such as Mollis Bloom, long soliloquy in James Joyce's Ulysses, lack of punctuation mark, also characters' names begin with small, not capital letters, and again, there can be argument on the attempt of the writer to undermine biblical truths. As far as the discussions on Bible translation are concerned, they arose even more questions. Is having a bad translation better than not having one at all? Can a good Bible translation be made by a non-believer, anyone? Would they consider working in this field? There are efforts done in this case at the university in my hometown. There's a department of biblical studies, both philological and theological. As far as various cases of translation adaptation are concerned, the problems translators are expecting to meet preparing versions for sophisticated technological societies awaiting for us in the future, or isolated communities, such as remote tribes from the Arctic, Brazilian forests, also the Bible for children, the funny Bible. Also, as far as Romanian culture is concerned, comparing old and new versions, Eastern and Western ones, in Romania we had the case of historians in the first half of the 20th century. They proved mostly relevant to the language developments over centuries and the translation attitude, the eternal fidelity in translation. Again, some aimed for literary success. Again, as a conclusion, so among other issues tackled, I could say that discussing the issues of translations and bringing Bible and literature into play to the theological English classroom is a good opportunity to develop the students' for skills in a communicative language teaching environment. And controversial issues were of interest to them, Saramago's materialistic atheism included, Bible translation and dynamic equivalence, domestication versus foreignizing. I think during the communist period, God as king was replaced by emperor because, well, of the monarchy that was no longer suitable to the new regime. So they should be able to speak in English about that as well. Thank you. Questions? Penny? I think there was a disclaimer in the beginning that I come from a philological background. So.
I think it's really interesting to have a theological English classroom. I am not sure to understand where it is in the general curriculum.
So what happens is that us teachers of foreign languages are partially contracted. There are the fully employed, and
like academia.
yeah, it's like academia everywhere. And the English and the French teacher, because they have to choose either English or French. For the Orthodox faculty of theology, the Roman Catholics ones only study Italian because they are more likely to get to Rome. And also there's a Greek and Latin contracted teacher. So we all try to, well, instead of general English, the tense and the rest, since we only have an hour and, a year and a half of our disposal, it would be more interesting to immerse in these topics. But there are only a few.
Theological French classroom?
No, not me. No, that's one of my colleagues.
So I mean that exists. You have theological
Yes.
French
Yes.
classroom, theological Greek classroom, and theological.
No, Latin and Greek is general, a little bit adapted, but their level being poor, I don't think they make most of it. But English and French is adapted to a theological content, and as far as I'm concerned, in academia, this is how it should be.
So, and do you think your observations, if theological Greek classroom would exist, do you think your observation would be transferable? It would be the same, or your concern are mainly for
I think
translation to English?
I think that they'd be more focusing on what happens in Greece and the Greek variants as opposed to the Latin ones of the Bible. If that's